Well, how do you get people to see the importance of the hope of Christ's return without jumping right into the predictions that are so rampant that you were just talking about? How do you find a balance between the two of a practical atheism and not having an eschatology on one hand and then this overemphasized jump towards, all of the end times type of things that we see?
Well, I think one of the things to do is to continue to point people back to the resurrection of Christ. And we were talking about Thessalonians right now, but it's really Corinthians where Paul has to argue that the most strongly, because here are people who they recognize that Jesus' body isn't in a tomb anymore, but they've lost the connection between his resurrection and the need for their own resurrection. And so what my tendency is to point people to Jesus' resurrection, but to remind them that Jesus' resurrection only means something because it's the beginning of our resurrection. Paul calls it the first fruits of the resurrection. In fact, in Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, there is a great picture of this because there's this incredible, beautiful geyser named Beehive that only goes off every couple of days. And the only way that you know that big geyser is going to go off is there's this little indicator that goes off about 20 minutes before it happens. And they have volunteers stationed out there to watch for the little indicator to go. And as soon as the indicator goes, they know that the big geyser is going to go. And then they get on the loudspeaker and they tell everybody in the park, no matter what you're doing, get over to Beehive. This is going to be spectacular. And for Paul, Jesus' resurrection is like that little indicator. And once that indicator goes, Jesus' resurrection, Paul knows that it's just a matter of time before the whole geyser goes, and that'd be our general resurrection. And the privilege that we have is to live in between his resurrection and our resurrection, and to get on the loudspeaker and call everybody to come. So I think the big job for us is to continue painting the picture for people of what the real Christian story is. The move from the creation of us to be God's showcase, to the fall where we lost it, and then his sending his son to be the one in whom it all is going to be remade. And it has to be remade, not just, on the inside in our spirits, but in our bodies and throughout the whole cosmos. And to just keep that in front of people, but not to let people get so sure that they know when it's going to happen that they start getting into silly behavior. But and here's where we get back to the Thessalonian letters. Paul's interest is in helping people understand, in the first place, if people have died, they haven't lost out on the resurrection. God's going to raise them up. And one of the reasons he writes 1 Thessalonians is to assure these people that when the Lord comes back, the people who are in the ground, they're going up first before all of us who happen to be living on the earth. And then secondly, he wants them to know that they don't have to be worried about all these reports that seem to have been circulating back in his time about, okay, Paul said the day of the Lord has already come. Look, we even got this letter that he's supposed to have written. He says, look, folks, things are going to happen. There's this man of lawlessness that's going to have to emerge, and he's going to have a similar kind of complex of miracles around him that were like the one that he is purporting to represent himself, this man of lawlessness, instead of the true obedient law keeper Jesus. And he's going to set himself up in the temple, whether that means a physical temple in Palestine or whether it means the church as the true and living temple of the living God. That's the prospect that really scares me, is this man of lawlessness, getting in charge of the church and just making things really, really bad for believers. And But for Paul, when that stuff happens, and the Lord's not coming back until that stuff happens. When that stuff happens, we're all going to know it. And it's not going to be so-and-so said and so-and-so said. We're going to know. And so he wants us to know that when the stuff starts going down, that means he's coming back. We'll all know. And then the third thing he wants us to understand is that our job, all of us, between now and then, no matter whether it's tomorrow, next year, 10,000 years from now, is to live in a certain kind of way. And those are the ethics of chapter 4, where in terms of our marital relationships and our sexual fidelity, we don't get into misbehavior. When it comes to relationships with one another, we practice brotherly love. And when it comes to the jobs and our vocations, we don't go live on the side of some mountain and say, oh, y'all take care of me because the Lord's coming back. He's given us work to do. Some of us have so-called secular jobs, and our job is to go do that work to the Lord. Some of us will have more formally vocational ministry jobs, and our job is to go tell them about the indicator geyser that's gone and the general resurrection that's going to come. And we're all called to tell that story, and we're called to live in a certain way.